in Kazakhstan when Nazarbayev became the Elbasi, and when he was almost eaten instead of sausage. And by the way, he regularly goes to Putin to complain. And he shows this to Tokayev, trying to turn things back around.
There's so much intrigue there that even Tokayev has taken notice of it. And it's no coincidence that he mentioned it in an interview. That all their contacts are unofficial. Here, of course, a good question arises. What could these people be negotiating about? Depose Nazarbayev and not yet depose Putin. Not
to negotiate for Nazarbayev to return to Kazakhstan and hand over half of Kazakhstan to Putin. Nazarbayev says, if you bring me back, I'll just hand over all of Kazakhstan to you, lock, stock and barrel. Because this unsavory person, the earthworm, he's working for Xi Jinping, he's working for China, and he's already showing you the horns and doing it quite regularly. In other words, there's a real intrigue going on there. You see, Alexei and dear viewers, as soon as we get fixated for a while on, say, some Latin American country, we end up missing out on a huge number of interesting things. For example, in Turkey, there was a contract signed for 2.5, almost 3 billion people for the sale of a Turkish aircraft to the Spanish, a military training aircraft, and so on. In every country, you can find plenty of such news items that just fall out of the news feed simply because there's no time to read them and everyone is fixated on this Maduro and his wife or on Trump.
But we won't do that. Let's focus, at least for starters, on analyzing the Kazakhstan case. Is Putin currently capable of orchestrating a coup d'etat in Kazakhstan and bringing Nazarbayev back?
No, I don't think he's capable of that because it would mean opening a serious second front. To be honest, I actually thought that after Georgia, Putin would attack Kazakhstan. Because Kazakhstan, although it's a large country, is sparsely populated, only 19 million people. Of those, 3 million are Russians, meaning about 1/6 of the population is Russian. Moreover, there's a huge border. Their border with the Russian Federation stretches for 7,000 kilometers. And Kazakhstan is a very rich country, so it's a very tempting prize. Because, of course, not in everything, but, for example, in uranium. It's the world's leading producer of uranium. In other words, it's the most important country, and I think Kazakhstan accounts for about 40% of the world's total uranium production. For nuclear power plants. So, in reality, for Rosatom to get such a big share would be very appealing. But you see, he went for Ukraine because Putin simply has a special connection with Ukraine. He really wanted to trample Ukraine, and in my opinion, I've written about this, I said it back on February 24th, 2022, Putin made his biggest strategic and geostrategic mistake. Because if it had been Kazakhstan, he could have taken it easily. Kazakhstan doesn't have an army, the Kazakhs wouldn't have fought him. They wouldn't have fought him the way the Ukrainians are fighting. China wouldn't have stepped in for Kazakhstan back then either. Because at that time there weren't such strong ties as there are now. Tokayev has strengthened them over the past 3 years. So back then it was all quite realistic. Now that's all gone because now the most important thing has happened. China has said that it is the guarantor of Kazakhstan's territorial integrity. So in reality now, if Putin tries to make a move on Kazakhstan, China will cut off all economic ties. In other words, to put it bluntly, China will first take away the Far East and Siberia from him, and then cut off absolutely all economic ties, and the Russian Federation will completely collapse, because right now Putin simply cannot survive without China at all. So, he missed the moment when he could have. Well, to put it bluntly, he really made a very serious mistake. Thank God for the Kazakhs and for Kazakhstan. Because they, of course, would have been an easier target for Putin and then the whole of Central Asia as well. But now all of that is gone. Now Turkey is there, now the Chinese are there too. And now they themselves won't surrender anymore. They've already gotten a taste themselves. Yuan, and in connection with China, China has already built its backup Silk Road through them. And now for China, this is absolutely a strategic territory that it will not give up under any circumstances.
Then you might wonder, why is he so concerned? Why air all this dirty laundry? Don't you think that in this way he doesn't want to open Xi Jinping's eyes to Putin, but rather to undermine him a bit in Xi Jinping's eyes and show in general Xi Jinping's eyes to Putin, but rather to undermine him a bit in Xi Jinping's eyes and show in general?
I think yes, of course. But no, when he gave this interview, it wasn't for Xi Jinping. He can just call Xi Jinping directly. He has his direct number. That is, they talk every day. He even speaks Chinese. He's a sinologist. He specializes in China, studied there, and speaks conversational Chinese. So he can easily communicate with Xi Jinping at any time, whether by smartphone or secure line, and so on. No, it's to show the global community that Putin has these kinds of behind-the-scenes connections. And maybe, it's also for those clans, the remnants of the Nazarbayev clans in Kazakhstan, because they need to be shown who's the boss in the house. And to say that, and to the neighbors as well, the East is a tricky place after all. There you really have to constantly stake out your territory and show who's in charge. Because Putin also deliberately receives Nazarbayev to annoy Tokayev. You understand that, right? So it's a game on both sides is being played. It's a game, a kind of pressure. And every time Tokayev tries to bite off a little more power, Putin pulls Nazarbayev, that little devil, out of the box and says, if anything happens, I've got him right here. The Kazakhstani Medvedchuk. If necessary, I can send him back the other way. Or the Kazakhstani Yanukovych. More like Yanukovych, actually, not Medvedchuk. Because after all, he's a former leader. So that's how things stand. It's an interesting situation, and it's worth keeping an eye on. It's a thorn in Tokayev's side. But I don't think Tokayev is too worried about it. He just... By the way, the proof is that he simply brings this out into the public sphere. That is, he calmly holds a press conference and says, yes, Nazarbayev is still hanging around somewhere, traveling, going to Moscow or wherever. But he can't say that Putin, the bastard, is playing games with me and constantly keeping my enemies closer to himself. But he made it clear that he's aware of everything that's going on, that he's the boss, and that everything is fine. In fact, from my point of view, the very fact that Tokayev aired this dirty laundry in public proves that he has power. He feels his own strength. He doesn't need to go to Putin, bow down and say, Putin, let's make a deal. Could you receive him less often? And so on. He says, I don't care who you receive there because I am the master in this country.
Putin, the geopolitical strategist, has achieved success. And this isn't just in relations with Tokayev, but with many others as well.